There are cars that define a decade, and then there's the 1957 Chevy Bel Air, a machine that somehow outlived time itself. It wasn't just another car rolling out of Detroit. It was America's reflection in metal, confidence, style, and the dream that the open road could take you anywhere. But behind that iconic chrome grin lies something far stranger, because the 57 Bel Air didn't just inspire a generation of drivers. It inspired rumors, government secrets, factory myths, and stories that sound more like urban legends than automotive history. Some of them were whispered in repair shops, some were buried in forgotten manuals, and a few were rediscovered decades later by chance, under seats, inside engines, and even locked within the car's own design. So buckle up. You're about to travel through 20 of the weirdest, most haunting, and most unbelievable truths ever linked to the 1957 Chevy Bel Air, a car that refused to stay just a car. Number 20. The Secret Government Fleet. In the late 1950s, most Americans saw the Chevy Bel Air as a symbol of comfort and success. But deep within Washington, it served another purpose, one wrapped in secrecy and steel. Few people know that in 1957, the U.S. government quietly ordered a fleet of black Bel Air sedans through an unmarked federal contract. The cars looked ordinary, but they were anything but. Each had reinforced suspension, heavy-duty brakes, and a hidden compartment tucked behind the rear seat. To a family man, it looked like extra trunk space. To an agent, it was a vault. Inside those compartments went cameras, radio transmitters, and sometimes items that never appeared on any inventory list. The idea was simple. The Bel Air was everywhere. Its familiarity made it invisible. Years later, when these cars were sold off as surplus, buyers thought they'd found bargains, until restorers began discovering sealed metal boxes and odd wiring hidden in the frame. One Ohio collector even uncovered weatherproof packets marked Property of the U.S. Bureau 1958. No official record ever confirmed the program, but for a car that defined American freedom, the Bel Air's first mission was ironically about control. Number 19. The color that never was, Jamaican turquoise. Every car lover knows the 1957 Bel Air for its bold tail fins and polished chrome, but few remember the color that never made it, Jamaican turquoise. It appeared proudly in Chevrolet's official catalog that year, a shimmering tropical blue that promised to turn every street into a beach road. Customers ordered it, dealers promoted it, factories prepared the paint. And then, nothing. Not a single Bel Air ever left the line wearing that shade. The truth emerged decades later. The pigment supplier DuPont discovered that under sunlight, the beautiful turquoise would fade to a sickly green within months. Rather than admit the failure, Chevrolet quietly shelved the color, but left it printed in brochures. A phantom promise of perfection. Confused workers mixed the paint anyway. A few cans escaped the plant, traded among enthusiasts like contraband art. Today, restorers sometimes recreate Jamaican turquoise using modern pigments, chasing a color that technically never existed. It's a strange thought. One of the most desired Bel Air finishes was never real at all. Maybe that's why collectors call it the color of imagination. Number 18. The Trunk Light Conspiracy. Pop the trunk of a 57 Bel Air and you'll find something deceptively simple, a small dome light, no bigger than a fist. But hidden inside that modest bulb lies one of Chevrolet's strangest forgotten inventions. It wasn't just a light. It was a secret emergency beacon. Engineers had quietly designed the trunk lamp to detach from its socket. The 6-foot wire that connected it could stretch to the ground, and with the flick of a hidden red filter, the white bulb turned into a warning flare. It was meant for stranded drivers on dark highways, a portable signal to say, "I'm still here." Yet Chevrolet never advertised it. The feature appeared in no manuals, no brochures, no showroom talk. Why? Because the company feared lawsuits. If a driver got hit while setting it on the road, they could be held responsible. For decades, the secret stayed buried until collectors began noticing that the original trunk lights had removable filters and longer wires than later models. Today, few of those red-tinted assemblies survive, but when you see one glow in a restored Bel Air, you can't help but imagine the engineer who built a lifeline, then watched it vanish into corporate silence. Number 17. The Fuel Injection Disaster. In 1957, Chevrolet wanted to prove that the Bel Air wasn't just a pretty face. They gave it something revolutionary: Fuel injection, a marvel of modern engineering, they said, the future of motoring. But the future arrived broken. Only about 1,500 Bel Airs ever received the system, and for good reason. The design came straight from race cars, full of delicate valves and precise pressure lines that most small-town mechanics had never even seen before. Chevrolet mailed out thick service manuals to dealerships, but they read more like rocket science than car repair. One frustrated mechanic famously said, "You'd need a translator from Mars to fix this thing." The fuel injection was temperamental. Too cold? It stalled. Too hot? It coughed. Too humid? It died. Owners grew tired of its moods and began paying to have the system ripped out, replaced by reliable carburetors. Within a year, Chevrolet quietly dropped the option. Decades later, collectors hunted down those rare injected models, the same cars dealers once couldn't give away. Ironically, what was once considered a failure became the crown jewel of Bel Air history, the flawed dream that finally earned its value. Number 16. The Canadian Radio Mystery. If you bought a 1957 Bel Air in Canada, you might have noticed something strange on the dashboard. A small radio button marked simply CD. Of course, compact discs wouldn't exist for another 25 years, so what could it possibly mean? The answer lay buried in Cold War paranoia. In the mid-1950s, the Canadian government quietly introduced a civil defense program designed to alert citizens in case of nuclear attack. All new cars were to include a radio tuner capable of switching to an emergency frequency instantly. Chevrolet complied, and the mysterious CD button, short for civil defense, was born. But here's the twist. The emergency network was never completed. No transmitters were ever built. The button worked perfectly, but it had nothing to tune into. Dealers couldn't explain it. Owners were baffled. And repair shops thought it was a manufacturing error. For decades, the extra button sat there, silent and meaningless, a reminder of a danger that never came. Today, Canadian Bel Airs with the original CD-labeled radios are collector's items, a forgotten relic from an age when fear itself was part of the design. Number 15. The Assembly Line Ghosts. The night shift at Chevrolet's Baltimore assembly plant was never quiet. Metal clanged, welders hissed, engines rumbled. But in 1957, workers began hearing something no one could explain. 3 sharp honks from a Bel Air horn, always at exactly 2:47 a.m. The cars on that section of the line had no batteries installed yet. They couldn't possibly make a sound. Still, the honking came. Night after night. Supervisors thought it was a prank. They locked down the plant, replaced wiring, even called in electricians to search for shorts. Nothing changed. The mysterious 3 honks continued. Same time, same place. Every night. Rumors spread. Some said a worker had died in that area weeks before, crushed by machinery. Others claimed it was the spirit of a test car that failed inspection and was scrapped before its first drive. The truth, as it turned out, was far less ghostly, but just as strange. Months later, during maintenance, a crew discovered an old speaker system hidden in the rafters, a forgotten setup from a dealer tour months earlier, programmed to play sound effects for visitors. Its timer was still active. The ghost horn wasn't haunting anyone. It was just a machine that refused to forget. Number 14. The heater core scandal. Every winter, Bel Air owners praised their cars for one thing: warmth. The 1957 model came with a brand new heating system that could turn a freezing cabin into a cozy haven within minutes. But that comfort came with a hidden cost. Chevrolet's engineers had designed an ultra-efficient heater core. Too efficient. It ran so hot that it literally cooked the antifreeze. Over time, the coolant thickened into a sugary sludge that smelled faintly like burnt marshmallows. The sticky residue clogged radiators, seized pumps, and slowly choked the life out of countless engines. Dealers across the country were flooded with complaints. Mechanics reported the same strange, sweet odor again and again, but Chevrolet's response was silence, or worse, denial. They blamed drivers for using the wrong antifreeze and accused garages of improper maintenance. It wasn't until early 1958 that the truth leaked out. The heater cores themselves were defective. Chevrolet quietly issued a technical bulletin and offered replacements, but no recall, no admission, no apology. Today, original heater cores from 1957 are almost extinct. They were victims of their own fire, small metal hearts that burned too bright, too fast for the cars they were meant to warm. Number 13, the paint code mistake. Chevrolet's color catalog in 1957 was a rainbow of optimism: turquoise, coral, copper, silver. But 2 shades of blue caused a quiet disaster on the assembly line. Dealers sold them under proud names: Larkspur Blue and Harbor Blue. They looked similar in the brochures, but anyone who saw them side by side knew the difference. One carried a hint of purple, the other leaned toward green. Simple enough until someone in the print department made a single devastating mistake. The paint code card sent to factories had been swapped. For 6 months, cars labeled Larkspur Blue rolled off the line painted in Harbor Blue, while Harbor Blue cars wore Larkspur. Most buyers never noticed, but one dealer in Michigan did. He parked 2 supposedly identical Bel Airs next to each other and realized they weren't twins at all. His complaint triggered an internal audit, and the truth surfaced. Chevrolet's solution was classic 1950s corporate logic. Pretend it never happened. No press release, no correction, just silence and a quiet fix for new orders. Today, verifying a Bel Air's true color requires its original build sheet, assuming it hasn't been corrected by history. Number 12, the speedometer prophecy. Every Bel Air driver saw it daily, that wide, sweeping speedometer stretching proudly across the dash. It was designed to read up to 120 miles per hour, though most 57s could barely touch 95. But on some cars, there was something else printed on the dial, so small you had to lean in close to see it. At exactly the 100 Mailslabisch mark, in tiny letters, were the words, "Slow down." Not every Bel Air had it. In fact, only cars built at the Flint, Michigan plant between March and May carried the message, and only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. For years, collectors argued about whether it was an urban legend. Then the truth emerged. A single worker named Harold Patterson was responsible. The year before, he had lost his teenage son in a high-speed crash. When he returned to the assembly line, Harold began etching the words by hand onto the speedometer templates. It was his quiet protest against speed, a personal crusade to save others from the same fate. When management discovered it, they let him continue. No one in upper corporate offices ever knew. Today, the few slow-down speedometers that survive are treasured by collectors, not for rarity, but for the message carved by grief, meant for strangers who would never know his name. Number 11, the glove box time capsule. Imagine buying a brand new 1957 Bel Air. Fresh paint, chrome shining, engine humming, and hidden somewhere inside, a secret message from Chevrolet itself. That's exactly what some owners unknowingly drove around with for decades. During a short-lived promotional experiment, Chevrolet engineers secretly installed small metal boxes behind the glove compartments of about 500 Bel Airs. Inside each box was a folded letter from the company's chief designer, a 1957 silver dollar, and a handwritten prediction of what cars might look like 50 years into the future. No one outside the design department knew about it. Dealers weren't told. Mechanics never saw it. The plan was to announce the time capsule cars on the Bel Air's 50th anniversary in 2007. But somewhere along the corporate timeline, the idea was simply forgotten. In 2003, a restorer in Arizona discovered one by accident while dismantling a dashboard. Word spread fast. Soon, other owners began finding them too. The predictions inside were a mix of genius and comedy. Flying cars, nuclear engines, highways in the sky. They were wrong about almost everything, except one line that read, "In 2007, people will still love this car." That at least came true. Number 10, the assembly plant UFO incident. October 15th, 1957, a night the workers at Chevrolet's Janesville, Wisconsin plant would never forget. The second shift had just begun when, without warning, every light in the building dimmed. Machinery sputtered to a halt. Then, through the skylights, hundreds of eyes turned upward and froze. Hovering above the assembly line was a massive, silent disk of light. Workers described it as metallic, glowing faintly blue, larger than a football field. It hung there for exactly 4 minutes. During that time, every electrical system in the factory went haywire. Welding torches sparked on their own, conveyors reversed direction, and paint guns began spraying at random. Then, just as suddenly, the objects shot straight up and vanished. Power returned, but something strange remained. Every Bel Air on the line, 30 cars in total, had their radios mysteriously tuned to the same frequency, 88.7 FM. There was no station there, not within hundreds of miles. Chevrolet executives dismissed the event as electrical interference. Weather reports from that night, however, show clear skies, no storms, no lightning. The story was quietly buried, but factory veterans swore it happened. Even today, restorers joke that if a Bel Air's radio drifts toward 88.7 on its own, it might just be listening for the same visitor. Number 9. The Celebrity Death Car Connection. Hollywood loved the 1957 Bel Air. It was glamorous, affordable, and photogenic, a car that looked as good under studio lights as it did cruising down Sunset Boulevard. But for a handful of stars, that beauty came with a chilling coincidence. In 1957, a Los Angeles dealership called Sunset Chevrolet became the place for celebrities to buy their cars. Actors, singers, even directors lined up for the latest Bel Airs, but within a year, 5 of those famous owners were dead. A plane crash, a drowning, a suicide, 2 heart attacks. Different causes, same connection. Each had purchased their Bel Air from the same showroom. The Los Angeles Times began investigating what locals were calling the Bel Air curse. Yet just before publication, the story vanished. The assigned reporter resigned days later, leaving journalism entirely. By early 1958, the dealership's sales manager, Vincent Cordova, disappeared. His car, a black Bel Air, was found wrecked at the bottom of Mulholland Drive. His body was never recovered. 6 months later, Sunset Chevrolet shut down for good. Today, nothing stands where the building once was, just a parking lot. But longtime residents say that sometimes, late at night, they still hear the faint echo of engines idling, as if the stars never really left. Number 8. The color-changing paint. At first, it sounded like a myth, owners claiming their Bel Airs were changing color depending on the weather. Some said their India ivory turned pink under the summer sun. Others swore their onyx black shimmered with a faint purple hue on freezing nights. Chevrolet dismissed the stories as nonsense, blaming cheap repaint jobs or owners' imagination. But the complaints kept coming, consistent and detailed, from all across the country. Finally, in the early 1990s, an MIT chemistry professor named Richard Kellerman decided to investigate. He analyzed paint samples from 17 surviving 1957 Bel Airs, and what he found stunned him. The paint contained trace amounts of a rare thermochromic compound, a material that shifts color when exposed to temperature changes. The compound wasn't supposed to be there at all. DuPont, Chevrolet's paint supplier, had accidentally mixed a small batch of experimental pigment into one shipment during April and May of 1957. Roughly 3,000 gallons of that paint went onto Bel Airs before anyone noticed. The result? A handful of cars that quite literally changed with the weather. Collectors now call them chameleon Bel Airs. Accidental masterpieces born from chemistry, mystery, and the warm chaos of 1950s innovation. Number 7. The radio number station. For most Bel Air owners, the radio was a window to America. Rock and roll, baseball scores, and late-night talk shows. But some drivers tuning their optional Wonder Bar radios late at night stumbled onto something far stranger than music. Instead of Elvis or Buddy Holly, they heard voices, slow, steady, and cold. A single person reading numbers, over and over. 7, 4, 9, 2, 6. No station ID, no commercials, no music, just endless sequences of numbers. When they tried to tune the same frequency on other radios, all they got was static. Years later, during declassified hearings, intelligence experts revealed that during the late 1950s, the CIA and other agencies used number stations to broadcast coded messages to agents overseas. What no one ever explained was why the Bel Air's Wonder Bar radio could pick them up so clearly when other models couldn't. Some engineers speculated that the Wonder Bar's unique automatic tuning circuit accidentally matched the transmission frequency of those secret signals. Others whispered that maybe it wasn't an accident at all. that certain batches of radios were deliberately built to listen. Whatever the truth, the idea that America's most beloved car might also have been an unintentional spy makes the 1957 Bel Air more mysterious than ever. Number 6. The cursed VIN sequence. Every car that leaves the factory carries a vehicle identification number, a string of letters and digits meant to mark it forever. But in the summer of 1957, one particular sequence of VINs at Chevrolet's Kansas City plant began to terrify the people who stamped them. It started with B57 Sinsaturiza 3000. The first Bel Air bearing that number rolled off the line on a Friday, June 13th. Within hours, 3 separate workers from that section were injured in unrelated accidents. 1 crushed hand, 1 broken leg, 1 electrical burn. Superstition spread like wildfire. Still, the cars kept coming, but every model stamped within that sequence, from B57 LZ 13000 through B57 3999, suffered bizarre defects. Engines seized, transmissions failed, paint peeled within weeks. Mechanics called them jinxed cars after the 17th incident. Plant management did something unprecedented. They ordered all VIN plates in that sequence destroyed and skipped ahead 10,000 numbers in the production log. Chevrolet's official explanation was a clerical error. But some of those early cars had already been shipped, and a few escaped the recall. Collectors still hunt for them. The Forbidden 17. No one admits to owning one, but registration records prove at least 3 still exist. Silent, perfect, and waiting. Number 5. The Trunk Monkey prototype. Long before the internet joked about trunk monkeys, Chevrolet actually tried to build one, in a way. In early 1957, engineers at General Motors were working on a device they called the Automatic Trunk Assistant. The idea was simple: make packing luggage easier through automation. The result, however, was anything but simple. The prototype used a system of pulleys, springs, and sensors to measure the size and weight of each item placed in the trunk. A mechanical arm, powered by a small electric motor, would then rearrange the luggage for optimal space efficiency. In theory, it could even retrieve specific items when commanded through dashboard buttons. In practice, it was chaos. The arm often misread the sensors, flinging suitcases around like a furious octopus. During one test, it launched a bowling ball clean through the rear window. Another time, it crushed a dozen eggs left in a grocery bag. The project met its infamous end during a demonstration for GM executives. The trunk assistant suddenly lurched forward, grabbed the company president's toupee, and crumpled it into a perfect square. The room went silent. The project was canceled the next morning. Rumor says one prototype survived, locked away in a private collection somewhere in Michigan, still waiting for its next command. Number 4. The paint that killed. Among all of Chevrolet's 1957 color options, none caught the eye quite like tropical turquoise. It gleamed brighter than the ocean under sunlight, the kind of color that made people stop and stare. But beauty, as it turned out, came with a deadly price. The problem wasn't the lead. All car paints back then had that. It was the pigment blend. When the paint aged and cracked, it released a fine turquoise dust that was far more toxic than anyone realized. Body shop workers who sanded or buffed tropical turquoise cars began falling ill. Migraines, dizziness, even memory loss. A few suffered permanent neurological damage. By 1959, insurance companies refused to cover any garage that accepted Bel Airs in that color. Dealers quietly offered free repaints just to get them off their lots. Chevrolet's internal memos, unearthed decades later, revealed that the company knew about the issue from the start, but calculated it would take 5 to 7 years for the pigment to degrade, long enough, they figured, for the cars to change hands. Today, restoration shops treat tropical turquoise as hazardous material. Technicians wear respirators and sealed suits. The EPA even lists the original paint formula as toxic industrial waste. It remains the only car color in history officially recognized as dangerous. Number 3. The engine block messages. Every now and then, a mechanic restoring a 1957 Bel Air pulls apart an engine and freezes. Hidden beneath the intake manifold, cast directly into the metal, are words, real sentences molded into the block itself. Not stamped, not carved, cast. Some simply read names or initials. Others carry phrases like, "Heaven can wait," or "For my son." One engine discovered in Texas held an entire 4-line poem about lost love, perfectly legible beneath 60 years of grime. Chevrolet insists it was impossible. The molds used for engine casting were tightly controlled, and no one, they claim, could have modified them without approval. But old workers from the Tonawanda engine plant tell a different story. During overnight shifts when supervisors were gone, mold technicians sometimes pressed clay letters into the sand molds, personal messages to the world, sealed forever in iron. The practice ended abruptly in 1958 when new management took over. No memo, no punishment, just silence. Today, finding one of those talking blocks is like discovering a time capsule built from grief, pride, or humor, the private thoughts of men who poured their lives, quite literally, into molten steel. Number 2, the Soviet connection. In 1957, at the height of the Cold War, 12 brand-new Chevy Bel Airs mysteriously appeared in Moscow. No export records existed, and shipping American cars to the Soviet Union was strictly forbidden. Yet photographs from that year show gleaming Bel Airs parked proudly on Red Square, drawing crowds of astonished onlookers. The CIA was baffled. Investigations uncovered a tangled trail that began with a Canadian import company, one that didn't exist on paper. The cars were shipped from Detroit to Mexico, transferred to a Panamanian freighter, rerouted to Cuba, and from there, somehow slipped into Soviet hands. But here's the twist. The Soviets didn't want the cars for technology. They wanted them for propaganda. In Moscow, the Bel Airs were displayed as symbols of Western decadence, proof, they claimed, of capitalist waste. It backfired spectacularly. Instead of disgust, citizens were mesmerized. People lined up for hours just to touch the chrome or peek inside. For many Russians, the Bel Air became the first car they ever dreamed of owning. The cars vanished after a few months, reportedly destroyed. But decades later, Western collectors visiting Russia claimed to have seen 57 Bel Airs with strange serial gaps. Too perfect, too preserved. Maybe the Kremlin didn't destroy them. Maybe it just kept a few trophies from the enemy it secretly admired. Number 1. The car that predicted its owner's death. It began like any ordinary sale. In September 1957, a man named William Brennan from Pittsburgh bought a brand new red and white Chevy Bel Air. The car was flawless, except for one thing. The odometer was stuck. It refused to move from a strange number, 37429. The dealer offered to replace the cluster, but Brennan shrugged it off. "I kind of like it that way," he said. 3 months later, on December 29th, Brennan suffered a fatal heart attack while driving home. Police found the car pulled neatly to the side of the road, engine idling. The odd part came when they looked at the odometer again. It now read 374,299. But according to the inspection, the mechanism was frozen solid. The gears inside hadn't moved in months. There was no physical way for the number to change. The final detail was what truly chilled investigators. Brennan's death certificate listed his time of death as 3:47 p.m. and 29 seconds, 37429. His widow kept the Bel Air for the rest of her life. She never drove it, but she claimed that on quiet nights she could hear the faint tick of the odometer, trying, she said, to turn one last time. And that's the story. 20 of the strangest, most haunting truths behind the 1957 Chevy Bel Air, a car that somehow became more than metal and gasoline. It became a mirror of America itself, its ambition, its creativity, its superstition, and its ghosts. From secret government fleets to UFO sightings, from cursed VINs to colors that could kill, the Bel Air's history reads like a novel, where every chapter begins with a roar of an engine. It reminds us that machines, too, can collect stories, that every scratch, every gear, every hum of steel carries a trace of the people who built them, drove them, and dreamed through them. Even now, nearly 70 years later, restorers still chase those legends, not because they believe all of them are true, but because the mystery keeps the car alive. So which of these weird facts surprised you the most? Have you ever come across your own Bel Air story? One that defies logic but feels too real to ignore? Share it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more journeys through the hidden corners of automotive history. Because, as the Bel Air proves, some legends never rust.